What's up everybody, it is Josh from the Misplay and I wanted to bring you guys one of my all-time favorite archetypes. As you can see, it is Sky Striker. Now, we do have support on Horizon, but it being in a very odd OCG pack, which kind of means we have no idea when their TCG is going to get it, if ever. So I was going to hold off on this until we got an announcement or news on when we we're going to get it, but because it's likely we won't, it's just going to show up in a random set. I want to show you through my current build for Sky Striker. Now bear in mind, it is a pure deck build. You're not going to see triple Ash Blossom, triple Infinite Permanence, you're not going to see Boral Sword in the extra deck, you're not going to see Appaloosa, you're not going to see Dragoon, you're not going to see any of those shenanigans. This is a pure and competitive casually competitive pure build, and I mean pure in its purest sense. So the extra deck, because it is pure, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Kagari, it's going to be 3 copies of Shizuku, which is the Searcher, 3 copies of Hayate, which does absolutely come in handy and with the new card can actually help OTK, 3 copies of Kana. Kana's definitely the least valuable of the Sky Striker Link 1 monsters. It can come in handy if you're doing, a battle of attrition, then Kana can come in handy where she just stops, your opponent's monster from attacking for a whole turn, which can, it has come up in the past. And then 3 copies of Zeke. Zeke being the one which can actually utilize our opponent's monsters when we do take them with Widowenka. So Sky Strike is not a new archetype. Everyone's kind of familiar with it and what the extra deck does, so I don't need to go into it into too much detail, but Zeke is definitely a very powerful link too. Hayate is very powerful. Shizuku obviously being arguably one of the best Sky Striker monsters in the entire deck, just getting that search during the end phase. Then obviously the infamous Kagari, which will just basically recycle a Sky Striker spell from the graveyard back to the hand. So extremely powerful. We all know what the Sky Striker extra deck does. Now the main deck is where I try and put my little bit of flair into it. There's only so much you can do with you running it pure, but obviously the heart and soul of the deck, Sky Striker Ace Ray. Ray is just always going to be played as a 3-of, so if you're playing Sky Striker, you're new to Sky Striker, always play Sky Striker Ace Ray at 3. I run Sky Striker Ace Rose at 1. I'm not a big fan of Rose. The only reason I run Rose is because Hornet Drones is still limited. If Hornet Drones ever goes back up to semi-limited or 3, then you can, arguably take out Rose. Rose does come up from time to time. She does have a negate, but the only thing is she kind of counters the way you play Sky Striker, because all of the Sky Striker spells, they get effects when you can basically only activate them when you don't control a monster in the main monster zone. It's all about getting your Link 1s or Zeke the Link 2 in the extra monster zone. And then you can activate your cards and you get a bonus effect if you've got 3 or more spells in the grave. Rose kind of contradicts that a little bit, but does help facilitate plays. It is a good card. Run it at 1. I don't advise running it any more of that, especially if Hornet Drones ever goes back up to semi-limited or unlimited, then you definitely don't need to run Rose in the deck at all. But these are basically the monsters in the deck. That is all. I used to run Rose at a 3-of as well, just because it was such a pain trying to draw into these. Because if you don't draw into any of these, you can't link summon. And with Linkage coming out, the card announced in the OCG, which is already out, and we don't know when we're getting it, it does help bring consistency because you don't need to draw into any of these to get into a Link 1. It's basically just a free Kagari, a free Shizuku off 1 spell card. So very, very powerful. For the moment, this is the ratio I'm happy with. I've not had any struggles with this. Somehow this is consistent. So yeah, that is essentially the monsters in the main deck. And I kind of enjoy the gimmick with Sky Striker because it is just a lot of spells. The main one, obviously, the kind of heart and soul in terms of spells of the deck is Sky Striker Mobilize Engage. This, I believe, is at a 2-of in Master Duel, which is an old OCG ban list, but Engage obviously being honestly better than a pot of greed. It's a search and a draw. If pot of greed had a search and a draw, it would be even more insane. So the fact that we have this and it's not once per turn, so you can search it and recover it from the graveyard with Kagari, is absolutely insane. So this obviously would be a 3-of if we could, but it is limited, so you run 1 engage. Another limited card is Sky Striker Mecha Modules Multi-Roll. This card is extremely strong. It does have a combo line with its field spell, which does allow you to special summon one from the deck. Also, like, just the fact that it kind of blocks out your opponent from being able to activate anything in response to your Sky Striker spells is extremely powerful. And the fact that you get to set Sky Striker spells from your graveyard at the end of the turn up to the number of Sky Striker spells activated this turn is extremely insane, because you can make a hard play and then multi-roll lets you recover in the end phase to make just a bigger play in your opponent's turn potentially, or the next turn. So multi-roll, obviously it's limited for a reason, so we're absolutely going to run it while we can. Next one is Widow Anchor. Widow Anchor is insane. It basically just lets you negate, it's a quick play negate for an effect monster, and if you have 3 or more spells in the graveyard, you can take control of that monster until the end phase. So not only is a monster effect, a quick play monster effect negate extremely powerful, the fact that you can wholeheartedly just take control of it is insane. The fact that this is at 3, if us Sky Striker players should be very, very grateful this is at 3. So these are kind of what make the deck. You've got your searcher and draw power. You've got the fact that your opponent can't activate anything in return and just lets you keep setting stuff. It's extremely powerful. And this is just the best interruption in the deck. And there is still more to come. So those are definitely, obviously, if Engage was at 3, run it at 3. Multi-roll was at 3, run it at 3 for consistency's sake. But these ratios are going to have to do for the moment. Now, for the sake of me just not caring about my opponent's board, I run a playset of Sky Striker Maneuvers Afterburners. Just a free pop of a monster on the field, and then if I have 3 more spells in the graveyard, destroy a spell or trap on the field. Extremely powerful. The fact that it's 0 cost, as long as I don't have a monster in the main monster zone, I can get 2 cards for the price of basically no cost, just this card. So this is extremely powerful. It can definitely wipe boards. I don't see a lot of people playing this, but I actually really like Sky Striker Maneuver Jamming Waves. When you're in a format where it's a little more, I guess, more row tier and under, obviously a lot of the meta decks don't play a lot of back rows, so Sky Striker Jamming Waves isn't too great. Afterburners will still be good, it's just a free pop. Jamming Waves having to target a set spell or trap on the field to destroy it, and then destroy a monster, is good. In the meta, not so much, so it doesn't see as much play. But in a format where, you know, Solemns are so powerful, where certain trap floodgates are so powerful, this actually comes up very, very often. And especially with Skill Drain coming back to 3, this can actually be a very good out to that with Sky Striker versus a lot of different matchups. So those I don't feel like running this at a 3-of is great, because you will run into matchups where your opponent doesn't have set spells or traps, but you're always going to run into situations where they have face-up monsters on the field. So Afterburners is always going to be a live card. Next is Sky Striker Mecha Shark Cannon. This is basically just a DD Crow. That is all this card is. And you can actually special summon it to your field as well, so just to make sure your opponent isn't going to even use it in the banish zone. So very good. You can absolutely run this at 3. I'm trying to get my hands on another copy because I feel like I could make more use of this at 3, but because it is so searchable, we have so much draw power on this deck, we can recover it, we can reset it. You can get away with it at 2, and then maybe just substitute for a DD Crow if you want to run hand traps, but Shark Cannon is an extremely powerful card. I run the package of Sky Striker Airspace Area 0 and Terraforming just to search it out. I used to run this at 3, then I dropped it to 2 with the Terraforming. Now I run it at 1 with the Terraforming, purely for the fact that this basically does allow us to special summon Ray from the deck. That's always going to be our goal. If we pop it and multi-roll, we will pop this. But I haven't had any consistency issues. I think one of these And the terraforming allows me more often than not to go into what I need to. And I just felt like I kept drawing into, another copy of this when I didn't want it. So if you do want to run Area Zero, maybe you run 2 copies and a terraforming. I definitely don't advise running this at 3. And it's probably a good idea to get used to playing this at 1 with a terraforming or not, because when linkage comes out, it kind of knows Area Zero's importance in the whole deck, in all honesty. So I run that at a 1 with terraforming. I feel like that's perfectly fine. For a bit of draw power, we run Sky Striker, Mech Armory, Hercules base. Basically draw a card every time the equipped Sky Striker monster destroys a monster by battle. But it does allow us to shuffle Sky Striker monsters back into the deck. Because Sky Strikers right now, they don't really OTK. It's one of those decks where your opponent's still allowed to play. Obviously your goal playing a Sky Striker is to lock it down as much as you can, but you don't have the monsters, especially running it pure, to swing for big damage at endgame right away. So usually it's going to be a battle of attrition, kind of like playing against Altergeist. So Hercules base kind of allows you draw power, but also to shuffle those extra deck monsters back into the extra deck to ensure that you keep playing. We run 2 copies of Eagle Booster. It is a good card, basically just making our Sky Striker monster immune to almost anything. But it is mainly there it will come up in clutch situations where you don't want your Sky Striker Link monster to go, but also for the fact it's just another spell in the graveyard, and there's quite a bit in here that we want to just load up on spells. It can make Kagari very, very strong mid to late game, but we also just want to get, the Widow Anchor and the Shark Cannon effects off, those Afterburners and Jamming Waves effects off as soon as we can. So that's why I run 2 Eagle Booster. I feel like it's too much at 3. At 2, it's kind of the sweet spot. Run 1 Metal Foes Fusion. Basically, just get this in your hand to discard it. Foolish Burial Goods this to the graveyard. Get it on the field to destroy it with multi-roll or Area Zero to get it in the graveyard. We want this in the graveyard because A, it helps with our spell count, but B, we want to shuffle it in for additional draw power. So it's like a pseudo Sky Striker card. Definitely only run it at 1, obviously, because it will shuffle itself back in and you draw 1 card. Upstart Goblin, basically it's a free draw and you get another spell in the graveyard. Pretty self-explanatory. Reinforcement of the Army to search Ray, Heart and Soul of the deck. Kind of why I don't run two rows. I think 1 row definitely helps that. And to help facilitate the right spells in the graveyard is 2 copies of Foolish Burial Goods to kind of go with our Kagari, or to go into the Metal Foes Fusion if we need it, just for the additional draw. So this works really well because A, it's also an additional spell in the graveyard, and B, it can help set up plays or continue combos. So this is a very, very strong card. I don't run it at 3 because this deck is very, very quick to get going. And I feel like if you're relying on Foolish Burial Goods to get your combos going, then your build's not working too well, because you should be able to run this at 1 or 0. I just like running it at 2 because it definitely helps just keep pushing and get to the cards that I want to my hand, or additional draw power, etc. So that's why I run that at 2, and obviously Rhoda and Upstart are limited right now. Definitely run them at more if we ever can. Now, back to Battle of Attrition, we run copies of 2 Pot of Avarice. Now, this card, whilst it can be a bit to set up, target 5 monsters in the graveyard, shuffle 5 into the deck, draw 2. The draw 2 is very powerful, and we've only got 4 monsters in the main deck, which is a playset of Ray, 1 copy of Rose, Hornet Drones obviously being a spell card. So, you're maybe wondering, where does Pot of Avarice really come into play? It's because of our extra deck. It's all obviously monsters in the extra deck, but the fact that 90% of them are link 1s, we're going to be linking and linking and linking and linking. So our graveyard's going to get very, very full of link monsters very quickly. Now the issue with Sky Strikers is if you're playing a battle of attrition and you can't swing for game very, very quickly, you're going to find yourself going through a lot of resources very, very quickly, and you're going to find yourself out of an extra deck before you know it, which is where Pot of Avarice kind of gives you peace of mind, where not only can you shuffle in your entire 5 of these, which is so much, from the graveyard back into the extra deck to keep you playing for longer, you get a draw 2. So Pot of Avarice is an extremely good card in this deck. Because it is a bit of a setup with 5 monsters in the graveyard, I don't advise running it at 3. I feel like 2 has been the absolute perfect ratio for me. Any kind of deck which can utilize Pot of Avarice first turn should run it at 2. And Sky Striker is definitely one of those decks that you can utilize Pot of Avarice first turn. So run it at 2. Run copies of Twin Twisters. Twin Twisters is, in the meta that I play, in the format that I play in, back rows is a lot more prevalent. So I would say, this is great. It's another spell in the graveyard, which is good. It can help pitch, Metal Foes if we have Metal Foes in the hand and we don't have multi-roll, etc. You can definitely swap this out if you want to make this a little bit more competitive. Swap out, the 2 Twin Twisters, maybe a Foolish Burial, run up 3 Ash Blossoms, 3 Ghost Ogres, 3 Nibiru's, whatever you want. This can definitely be substituted for some hand traps. I always kind of like to point that out with these pure builds because there is room for growth, and if you want to make it a step above where it is now. So that's just in there because of the format that I play in, but definitely substitute that for hand traps. And then the last group of spells for the main deck. Thank you, ban list, because this feels perfect for Sky Striker, is a playset of Raigeki. No one had any idea this was going to go up to 3, and in a format where clearing boards non-targeting is extremely strong regardless of if you're playing meta or not, and it's an additional spell in the graveyard, it's not once per turn. Raigeki is extremely good in a Sky Striker build. Pretty much all you've seen in the main deck is 4 monsters and a bunch of spells so far. Raigeki, just out of 3, it's great. You may say that it's a bit too much with the afterburners. I don't think so. I just feel Sky Striker excel where for no cost you can just pop your opponent's cards so easily, and you have effect negates with Widowmaker, so it's not like they're always going to be unaffected. And then you do also run, I also run just a playset of Solemns. I have 2 Solemn Warnings here and Solemn Strike. Obviously I'd run 3 Solemn Strikes if I could. They're just a little bit harder to obtain. Not so much with Grand Creators. Solemn Strike coming out in that set was definitely a good thing, and those are going for like 50 cents to $1 right now, so that's very good. But I just run the 3 Solemn package because, who knows? In a format where it's a bit slower, and if you need to get rid of a problem monster when it activates its effects, or you need to get rid of just an important summon that if they're going for, if you're playing against Shadows, you don't want them to go into a Winder and a Winder would absolutely kind of destroy this because you link into one while it's on the field and you can't link again, so it stops your plays. Solemn just kind of helps prevent them going into the monsters that you need. So that's why I run the Solemn package. Solemn package is always going to be good. It's a timeless package. And then obviously, like I said, you can substitute some of these cards for hand traps, like the Twin Twisters, like the Foolish Burial Goods. You can substitute the Jamming Waves for some hand traps. But I definitely think Raigeki is a really good addition to this from the ban list. And it works perfectly in Sky Striker because I feel like Sky Striker can fit it. But obviously if you're not too keen on it, you want to run the 1, you don't want to run any, just more hand traps if you want to make it more competitive. That's pretty much the name of the game. Run more hand traps if you want it to be more competitive. But this is a casually competitive pure variant, and that's the build I've currently got now, and it works very well. We're playing up against Dragon Maid. We've got Altergeist with Multi-Faker back at 3, and it's just got new support. We've got all these decks that Tyler and I play here at the Misplay, and we're going to have live duels very soon. But this deck has really stood the test of time for the last 3 years. I believe it came out in 2018 or something like that. It's been a very good archetype. But yeah, that's it for the deck build. Pretty straightforward. If there's any tech cards you would like for me to add in my build, I'm always open to it. I want to make this deck as good as I can whilst trying to keep it as pure as possible. And if there's any decks that you guys would like for me to build or Tyler to build, definitely just drop a comment in the comments below and we'll get on it as soon as we can. Peace.